Disinformation is a problem.
Our reality has become increasingly shaped by false information.
And they're creating opportunities to deceive people.
The fact that people so easily believe things, it has grave consequences.
Let me be more specific. Russian disinformation is a problem.
Russia's interference in the 2016 election.
The Kremlin is stepping up its campaign to divide Western political and security institutions. We expect Russia will continue to wage its information war against democracies and to use social media to attempt to divide our societies.
You might be tempted to click away at this point because you're thinking, I've never seen any Russian disinformation, but here's where I tell you it is almost certain that you have. Have you ever heard that the CIA conspired to assassinate JFK? Yeah, the Russian government made that up. Have you ever heard that the FBI assassinated Martin Luther King? Russian government. Have you ever heard that the AIDS virus was manufactured by the American military as a biological weapon against Africans? Have you ever heard that liberals have a nefarious plot to take away Americans' guns? Have you ever heard that illegal immigrants who make up at most 3% of the population are responsible for 60% of American murders? Yeah, all that was made up by the Russian government, who injected it into our national consciousness with one intention: to sow chaos and reap destruction. If we don't understand what the Russian government is doing and how to defend ourselves, then our society will only grow more fractious, will only become more hateful of one another, and in the end, our republic will be marred beyond recognition. Now, to understand where all of this came from, we need to begin with the Cold War, which was an ideological battle between the United States and the Soviet Union that lasted for 4 decades after World War II. Now, the dominant ideology of the Soviet Union was authoritarian communism, while America's ideology was democratic capitalism. So on the most basic level, that's what the Cold War was about. Like, would the world be remade into the image of the communist Soviet Union, or would it be remade into the image of the democratic United States? And technically speaking, the Cold War ended in 1991 with the fall of the Soviet Union, but as the 21st century has dawned, the Russian government has struck back against America and its allies with subversion and disinformation and political warfare, and what has become abundantly clear in the last decade is that for the Russian government, the Cold War never ended. The only difference between us and the Cold War generation is that they knew the Russians were trying to dismantle our society, but for us, for the most part, we don't. Now, the Russians know how to do this because they have been playing this game for a very long time. In 1923, Joseph Stalin ordered the creation of the Department of Disinformation, and disinformation was a term that Stalin himself coined. The word was defined by the Great Soviet Encyclopedia, published in 1952, as the dissemination of false reports intended to mislead public opinion. So once the Cold War began, the Soviets already had a well-established deception factory that churned out lies with incredible efficiency. And by 1965, the CIA commissioned a study on Soviet disinformation campaigns and came to the conclusion that these campaigns had multiple prongs of attack. The first was to destroy the confidence that Americans had in their governmental agencies like the CIA and the FBI. And maybe one way to destroy confidence in the CIA is to manufacture stories about how that agency assassinated the president in 1963. Second, mar America's reputation among its NATO allies and break up that anti-Russian alliance. And we saw one of these campaigns actually very recently. Like, have you ever heard that a very influential American by the name of Bill Gates had a vested interest in the COVID-19 pandemic because he intended to use his great wealth to implant the world's population with microchips? This story spread with great speed throughout the European Union thanks to a Russian disinformation site called newsfront.info. And what could be more alienating to our allies than the fact that an American has plans to microchip them? Third prong of attack: discredit America in the eyes of the developing world. To this end, the Department of Disinformation planted a story in a newspaper they owned in South America claiming that the American government had manufactured the AIDS virus as a biological weapon against Africans. Also in 1984, the year that Los Angeles was hosting the Olympics, Russians produced a pamphlet in the name of the Ku Klux Klan warning African athletes that if they came to America, they would have nooses waiting for them. Fourth prong of attack was to exacerbate existing political political divisions, and it's here that most people watching have come into contact with Russian disinformation. In 2014, Russia established the Internet Research Agency, or the IRA, whose purpose was to alter the minds of the American public. In that year alone, the IRA hired over 400 Russians who spoke fluent English and worked in 12-hour shifts. And according to Marat Mindyarov, who defected from the agency after 4 months, their purpose was to, quote, write that white is black and black is white. And your first feeling when you ended up there was that you were in some kind of factory that turned lying, telling untruths into an assembly line. And what do these trolls seek to exploit? Well, in their initial training, they are instructed to become intimately familiar with several divisive American issues like gun rights and immigration, and most importantly, racism. And once they understood what made Americans angry, their job was to create thousands of social media accounts that rubbed the salt of disinformation into those festering wounds. Now listen to what Tim Weiner says about this group in his book, The Folly and the Glory. From the outset, the mission of the IRA was to incite a civil war within the American political system. As a report released by the Republican-led Senate Intelligence Committee put it, the Russians sought to blur the lines between reality and fiction, erode our trust in media entities and the information environment, in government, in each other, and in democracy itself. Like, is that not the best explanation of our current cultural environment that you've ever heard? And like, what's crazy is that this disaster has fallen upon us because the Russian government meant it to. And to be clear, Russian disinformation isn't the only cause of our societal problems, and maybe it's not even the biggest one, but it's astonishing to me to see what they have been able to exploit among us. And every disinformation campaign that I mentioned earlier in the video was documented as fake by dozens of credible sources, including the Senate Intelligence Committee and the US State Department. Let me just give you a few examples of what the Russian IRA did to achieve these goals in pursuit of their ultimate prize, which happened to be the election of 2016. And again, all of this comes from the Senate Intelligence Committee's report on the matter, which is linked below. Now, once Trump's candidacy was secured, a Russian undercover agent named Maria Butina asked him a question at a press briefing. She wanted to know if Trump would continue the harsh sanctions enacted against Russia if he were elected. Essentially, he said, no, I don't think the sanctions are necessary, and that was all that the Kremlin needed to throw the full weight of the IRA into American politics. And according to Tim Weiner, they developed a three-front strategy: the right front, the left front, and the black front. The right front was dedicated to making Trump stand out as the preferential candidate. To this end, the IRA pushed out social media content devoted to the dangers of immigrants, to racist invectives against President Obama. Additionally, there was the Heart of Texas campaign on Facebook. And this conglomeration of disinformation claimed that President Obama was nigh unto invoking martial law with the intent of seizing guns from average Americans. And do you want your mind blown? That page gathered over 4.9 million shares and 5.4 million likes. Now, the left front was designed to discredit and defame Hillary Clinton. And here the Russians were wildly successful. Like, after hacking the servers at the Democratic National Convention, they found a bounty of hundreds of emails that stained Clinton's reputation. Not only did they find top secret emails that had been sent on a private server, but they also found evidence of her campaign's strategy to discredit her opponent, Bernie Sanders. And all of this, the Russians gleefully made public. And while news outlets were foaming at the mouth over the content of these emails and what they meant for the Clinton campaign, what everyone seemed to be missing is that the Russians hacked into the DNC servers to get us those emails. Then there was the Black Front, in which the IRA invested arguably more energy than either of the other fronts, according to the Senate Intelligence Committee. The effort here was to keep Black Americans away from the voting booth by flooding social media with messages like, "Our votes don't matter," and "Don't vote at all, because Clinton was indeed evil and it would be wrong to compromise themselves by voting for the lesser of two devils." Like, this is voter suppression 101. And one of the most effective Russian trolls set up a Facebook page called Blacktivists, which sought to infect the wound of American racism by recalling the KKK pamphlet against the Africans at the 1984 Olympics, which I must hasten to remind you was also Russian propaganda. And if you're tempted to dismiss all of this, just know that much of what we know about the IRA's campaigns comes not only from our own intelligence agencies, but also from those who defected from the Department of Disinformation itself. So, if you've been paying attention for the last last 5 years or so, there's no doubt that the flood of Russian disinformation campaigns have been exceedingly effective in achieving their goals. The lines between reality and fiction have indeed been blurred beyond distinction. Like, a whole swath of the American public no longer trusts the media to be truthful. And confidence in our democracy is unraveling at a disturbing pace. Now, to be fair, we can't blame the Russians for all of our problems. Like, there have to be existing wounds for them to rub salt into. So all of this raises a very pressing question. Why is the Russian government doing this? Well, according to Casey Strickland, who is a researcher specializing in the effects of Russian information influence, Russia has 4 main goals that they aim to achieve through their disinformation campaigns. Goal number 1, restore Russia to great power status. To the Russian government, power is a zero-sum game. The only way they believe that they can gain more power is if others lose it. Goal number 2, preserve Russia's sphere of influence. If America is racked with internal problems, then we will have less energy to pursue our international goals, some of which are at odds with Russia. Goal number 3, protect the Putin regime. A top priority for Putin is to prevent Russians from longing after Western-style democracy. Disinformation campaigns have a way of discrediting our ability to handle the responsibility of democracy. And then goal number 4, enhance Russia's military effectiveness. If Russia can unravel an enemy from the inside, that enemy isn't as threatening in the long run. So, in the end, no superficial tactic is going to defend us. Like, we need a much deeper solution. And for that deeper solution, let's hear from George Kennan, who was an American diplomat in the Soviet Union during and after World War II, and who arguably knew more about Russian disinformation than any other American at the time. He wrote that the only way America could survive the onslaught of Russian disinformation is to prove to the Russians that America is, quote, a country which knows what it wants, which is coping successfully with the problems of its internal life and with the responsibilities of a world power. If there was ever a chance for us to fend off the crushing attacks of disinformation in this age, then we have to look at each other, we have to talk to each other, and most of all, we have to do the work of healing our ancient American wounds. Alright, thanks again for watching. If you found this helpful, you want me to keep making these videos, then subscribe to the channel and let me know. Like I said, all the sources for this video are listed below in the description, and I would encourage you to have a look at them yourself. Also, I'd be curious to know if you ever came across any of these disinformation campaigns yourself, so let's chat about that in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.